Okay, this is a continuation. Sorry, I had to take a break for a minute there. Okay, so we went through these: impulsiveness, solo and group training, the benefits and the darker side, the downsides of them. But race scheduling, I would probably say, is a major problem with athletes. They make the beginning of the year to the end of the year sort of a mishmash of long and short training. And there is a logic to setting up your schedule so that your strengths and weaknesses are worked on earlier in the year in your training, but then you're using specific races to kind of build on your fitness from short to long. And you see the best athletes usually train the shorter races in the early part of the year, and then they kind of gradually move to longer races. But it has a lot to do with your experience. So if you're an Olympic distance pro and you've got a lot of Olympic distance training in you, and you're trying to, go up to longer distance like half Ironman and longer, you can spend, the early part of the season racing half Ironman to Ironman. But it has a lot to do with experience and fitness. But I would suggest first and foremost that you look at your schedule from January to the following October, November, and start to block out what's important. What are these short running races, the time trials, the duathlon, the sprint triathlon, Olympic, etc. So that you're building your fitness and using these races to get real fitness result that you can actually take those results and say, I can build my next training program off of those results. And then you're not going into training or these races fatigued, and you're using this sort of plan, A race, B race, and C race sort of mentality. Because what that ends up doing is it makes you fall short of what your real potential is in that race by thinking that it's not that important. I'm tired. You don't want to build in excuses into your preparation, into your racing. And which it gets me the excuse issue. That's a whole other thing with triathletes, but I might add that one later. And so too much too soon. That's everyone. I did it. I told you with my introduction how I started racing Ironman at 19 years old. Well, it was too much too soon. And for those of you out there that are thinking of doing Ironman before you've done any other distance, which is a number of people, I do not recommend it. It's going to wreak havoc on your body. Your body is like anything, is this machine that has to sort of slowly be dosed stress over consistent periods of time in order for it to adapt, or everything sort of falls apart on you, and that's not a good feeling. And regardless of whether or not you cross the finish line, is that you're setting yourself up for injury and disappointment. And, if it's not in that race, it's going to be in a race quite soon thereafter. And with critical power and critical volume and velocity, this needs to be measured. I think every triathlete should start off with only what they can absorb. And there's a physiological model and a fact about what an athlete can absorb and how to measure that. So don't ignore that reality and just get out there and start stacking on long, slow distance when you don't even know how fit you are, and hoping that the winter is this base period that is going to magically give you all this fitness for the springtime, because it doesn't work that way. And symptoms, treating symptoms. These athletes in races are constantly popping NSAIDs, NSAID, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, anti-inflammatory drugs. Your intention is good. You want to block inflammation enzymes, but the reality is that your gut, liver, and kidneys can be really overstressed. You can create gastric bleeding, renal strain, and potentially renal failure. It's not smart. Your body has an inflammatory process for a reason. You need to honor that. You need to know the foods that reduce the inflammation and learn how to rest and recover, so chronic inflammation isn't present. And there's a reason why you have chronic pain and chronic tendinosis or tendinitis. You're doing too much. Your body isn't absorbing the stress, and no foam roller or over-the-counter medication is going to change that biological reality. And the last thing is diet and recovery and restoration. This is every athlete out there. You know, the amount of pastries and bread-related foods that endurance athletes consume, in spite of knowing what those foods do to their body, is pretty profound. I mean, when you think about it, every bakery is like an endurance athlete's dream. Now, I enjoy baked goods. I stay away from them because of the extra calories and the gluten, but it's something that should be considered. You know, we as triathletes or endurance athletes think that we can get away with eating anything and everything, and we're not thinking about the consequences of those foods because we say, well, we can burn through it. So what does that mean, burn through your calories? You mean metabolize your calories? Is there any effect that these foods, negative effect that they can have in your body long term? And just the fact that you think that you can get away with it is just another attitude that probably should be explored and considered. Recovery and restoration is everything. You know, the weekly recovery, the daily recovery, and you know what fatigue you should be experiencing versus when you've reached maximum, you know, overload, and you're avoiding now. You have to avoid overreaching and overextending yourself to try to get 1 more %. So that's a real important part of this, so that you don't blow yourself to pieces and end up, you know, with chronic fatigue and worn out and injured. And then, you know, that brings me to restoration, and that means weekly restoration, or put it this way, monthly restoration, or quarterly and seasonal restoration. You know, you can't. Hold on 1 second. Yeah. And it's an important part of being able to build your fitness and stay motivated. And if you're not taking these longer breaks, these 10 to 17 day breaks periodically, you're going to fry yourself, and you'll never be able to maintain the concentration and the consistency long term. So that's it. These are the 10 critical errors that triathletes make, and my job is to work with you and help you avoid those mistakes. Thanks.